to So You Want to Program During a Pandemic. We're going to spend some time today really discussing how to create some safe programs and some of the opportunities in this particular season that we're in with COVID-19 and all the things we need to consider. And it's so glad that y'all were able to come in and join us so that we can discuss this topic thoroughly and be able to share some ideas. As we are kind of going through the presentation, we want it to be interactive, so there are some interactive components as well. And we're here to learn too. So I wanted to share that, but I wanted to introduce myself and the rest of our presenters. My name is Chantel. I'm the Assistant Director for Health Promotion, and programming is a huge part of what I do day to day. And here recently it's been a little bit more involved than the typical year, but it's been a lot of fun. I've been getting to work with Jen, who I'm gonna let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, Jen Cohen. I serve as the interim director over in LSI, Leadership and Student Involvement. So we do programs, that's what we do. And then I also serve as the chair of the SEAS programming team, which is a new reiteration of a previous committee. So I'm the person who sends out a ton of stuff about programs and how we can do this in our current reality. And then I'll turn it over to Sarah Nett.
Hi, I get to work with Jen and Chantal. And I work in the Career Development Service Office. We help students with their career decision-making, both getting opportunities on campus as well as when they graduate and internships. And so we do a lot of programming, from career fairs to programs to things of that nature. So I get to work with these wonderful two individuals and some other folks. Back to you, Chantal.
Awesome. So let's talk about what we're gonna cover. Let's see if I can, there we go. So we do have some goals and objectives, some things that we want you to walk away with as a result of being here and participating in this workshop. We really want you to understand that, yes, COVID-19 and all these stipulations on what we can and cannot do can be really stressful, but there are some opportunities as well. And we want you to be able to identify what those opportunities and considerations are. We want you to be able to discuss how you can make some of these things happen, how you can think outside of the box with programming and be able to reach more students. So we want you to also be able to walk away with this new perspective about pretty much how you can program, how you can reach more students, how we can potentially collaborate with our students. So we want you to take all this in, and these are really the key things we want you to take away from being here and participating in this workshop.
Okay, great. So we know that there's some considerations and opportunities that we need to really consider, considerations we have to consider, right? When deciding what kinds of programs we want to do, what kind of events we want to offer, what modality that should be in, and how we can do that safely, since that is a top priority. So I'm going to go over a couple of them, but I welcome you to add any that you might be thinking of either in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and share, and we'll capture that as well. So when we were looking at this and thinking about all of the different programs that we typically do throughout the year, some of the barriers that we were considering were some just basic safety limitations, including those gathering limits. So if you weren't aware, our gathering limit changed last night from 50 to 25. We have a program tonight that Chantal and I are doing, and so we'll talk about that and how do we shift and adjust. The space availability is both limited and oftentimes not ideal spaces. Right now, like Web Center is typically a huge programming space. We have a number of rooms that we use. We're down to 4 that we can use on a regular basis, and then on a limited basis later on. So we're really looking at what are our outdoor spaces, where can we be real creative. I've met with athletics of what facilities that they have that we can do things in. We added a tent in the back of Web Center as an option. But what does that look like? And how can we make those spaces work? Right now, we do have a limitation where vendors or external partners are not able to be here on campus. And so that can be limiting. And so thinking differently about how we can incorporate them in our programs and get them to our students. Considering cost and time investment and whether that's a true return on investment. Is it worth it to be able to do something for a limited number of students? And then finally, that concern for staff or participant exposure for doing some of things that are either hybrid or in person. But then we also started looking at what are some of those opportunities? What can we do that could really benefit us in this time? So when we're looking at some of our hybrid programs, is that increased reach. So previously, many of us kind of struggled on how do we incorporate our online students or our distance learners. And this way we are intentionally deciding how can we incorporate them and either create a similar or the same experience for them as well. It potentially broadens our audience. So if we have a student who perhaps is in Richmond and that's where they live and they're taking all their classes online, they're not really having that on-campus experience and they might not have access to those same experiences. So this could enable them to do so. So engaging those virtual students and then also being able to program to a specific population. So we might have a lower capacity limit of who we can engage, but then maybe we can be more specific and targeted and be okay with that we're not trying to bring in numbers, but we're really trying to create a specific experience for a certain audience. So that is another opportunity. And so really wanting to see from our, everyone that's here is, do we miss anything for either barriers or opportunities or things that you've been considering? And you're welcome to unmute yourself or share it in the chat. Or maybe even some things that you're like, ditto, I thought about that. That's a concern for me. Or that's an opportunity that I've explored.
I agree with all of these. I think another thing is like thinking about like our first year students who don't know how to get involved or aren't really kind of in the loop of if I wanted to get involved or if I wanted to know what's going on campus, like how can I do that, among them being just simply overwhelmed with all the schoolwork that they're doing mostly online. So the whole Zoom fatigue idea is definitely real with a lot of the students.
I think too, you mentioned a good point, and I think historically a lot of our students are one of those that you walk by and and you see an opportunity and then they take it right then and there. It's not really that whole planned and advanced component. And we'll talk about that too, of how do we manage signups and RSVPs versus walk-ups too. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, if you do think of any, please feel free to share them later or in the chat. We're always welcome to hear back for that.
Now, why in-person connection is important with safety as the priority. Some of the social interactions, we really want to think about socializing. What are those safety pieces? Well, one of them is just socializing just helps. It just helps a student feel connected, feeling like they belong. So keeping that in mind. Some people really enjoy the interaction. There are so many different types of interactions, from the exchange or from a little happy competition, from cooperation, sometimes the conflict and the coercion. All of those are just types of social interactions, and they're helpful for students. A note, and oftentimes in our field in SEAS, we focus on the top three, which is the exchange, the friendly competition, and the cooperation, because it helps with leadership and developing them and making sure they're great citizens. Some would believe that if you can communicate it helps and do that in person. It helps you to stay healthier. There's lots of studies that talk about how connecting with people gives you a great way of staying healthy and helps you deal with the stresses of life. So there are a lot of different studies that talk about social interaction, but making sure that we're thinking about it in a way where we're socially distancing, where we're providing those social interactions, where people are able to feel connected and maybe have barriers in between, but still able to make those eye contacts and make those jokes or do some friendly competition. Those are just great things to keep in mind. And again, one of the last things that we have is the question. So what do you think is important for college students regarding social interaction? So if you can include that in the chat or share it now, that'll be great. But what are your thoughts? Anybody?
I just want to jump in a little bit here and share a little bit about a study that came from Active Minds over the summer. And it talked about a lot of what students are missing and how important that face-to-face connection is. And students really were feeling like there was a decline in their mental health because they weren't getting a lot of social interaction, which I remember having this discussion at another presentation and really noting how surprised I was with that. Because a lot of our students, if you see them, they're like on their phones, they're very connected to social media. But I think that some of it has to do with like just burnout from some of those things, and they know that that's not always reality. But when you're connecting with someone one-on-one, you're getting something that's more authentic. So just to have that in the back of our minds when we're making those decisions about, okay, what is going to be, face to face and what's going to be completely virtual? What can we do hybrid? Like for instance, I'll give you an example. Jen and I talked last night about, okay, we have 2 sessions, but now we have a limit of 25 people for silent disco. Do we add another session? Do we, so we can reach more students, or do we just keep it as is? And there's this kind of back and forth between, okay, safety and giving students that opportunity to do some socially distanced face-to-face programming. So just kind of keep that part in mind. And Active Minds is a great organization. If you ever want to look up that, if you want the study, the information about it, you can reach out to me via email and I can send it to you.
Those are great points. In the chat box, we have networking and just fun events. And that's true. That's so important for college students. And then the next one was programs they can attend in the residence halls to get to know other residents. And that's especially important for freshmen. So those are some additional thoughts. Thank you.
All right, so Happy Hour with a Twist is an event that Health Promotion does every single year. I mean, I've been with ODU for quite some time, and Happy Hour with a Twist was a staple when I came into the assistant director position. And we've been hosting this program literally every year since. So essentially, coming into this whole situation with COVID-19, we're talking about programming over the summer. My staff, they're like, this needs to be virtual. Then you have folks over here saying we do some stuff face to face. So there was a lot of kind of back and forth about how we would manage this. I do remember talking to Colson and saying, what do you think? Should we cancel it? And we essentially chose to go ahead and host it. We did host it as a hybrid event. There was like a social media component on Instagram, which was really nice. But as far as the in-person component, we really just took our time and made sure those safety components were there. We made sure students were showing us their daily check-in. We made sure we had a pretty much a touchless check-in option. Pretty much that was the only option, was touchless check-in, where students could scan a barcode and go straight to Monarch Groups and check in. and students enjoyed it. It wasn't our normal event. It wasn't, we didn't have 300 students on Kaufman Mall like we typically do, listening to music. It was a more condensed but yet still impactful event. One of the other things that was really kind of a barrier that we had to kind of work around was we have a lot of vendors come to campus for this event. And we knew early on that they weren't going to be able to come to campus. So we were able to reach out to them ahead of time and say, hey, are there any things you want to share with our students? Things that you may want to drop off, any giveaways? We collaborate with Virginia ABC Prevention. And they sent us a ton of stuff. They just mailed it. They didn't even come to campus. They just mailed us a bunch of giveaways for students. Students loved the giveaways. We were all out of them by the time the event was over. And as far as student participation, they still loved their t-shirt and they still took their assessment, and we still got some good information about their behaviors regarding alcohol, and the students still had a good time. And I love going back and looking at the pictures from the event, because even though it wasn't our normal, crowded Kaufman Mall, it was still a good event. I see students, I can see that they're smiling from their eyes when I look in the pictures, and staff was comfortable. That was a big thing, because at one point we were like, are we going to have enough staff to staff this event? Because we had a lot of students who weren't comfortable coming on campus. And by the time the event came around, they were moved back on campus and everything. And it just happened to work out that they were feeling more comfortable about kind of being out and about. But we did even limit how staff came in and out of the office. We had a limit on who could be in the office, when a lot of people who worked that event didn't even come into the office that day. So those are just things to be thinking about. And just kind of wanted to know from y'all, if y'all are doing events that are face-to-face, what steps are y'all taking? What habits are you kind of picking up now when it comes to, programming in person? Oh, also, this was an outdoor event. So one of the things that we took the step to do was we said, if this event doesn't happen because of rain, this event will not happen this way. Essentially, we came up with a plan to, okay, we have these t-shirts and these giveaways. How are we gonna be able to get rid of those items and give them to students? We had a whole nother plan for that involved social media, essentially, versus us trying to find another date when there's limited space. Thankfully, it didn't rain that day. I was so excited not to see very many, there were clouds in the sky, but we took the chance that day. I actually can't see the chat. So Sarah, do you see the chat? Okay, awesome. We'll move to the next slide.
So finding my unmute button was interesting for me that moment. So shared experience, career fairs. You have 3 photos in front of you. If you start with the right-hand one, that was our past career fairs. We got so excited with the crowdedness, the idea of having the vendors and the students in close proximity to each other, the shaking of the hands. I'm going to repeat that, the shaking of the hands. I don't know a career service person that doesn't just get so excited about a smile and a shaking of a hand. And when COVID took place, it was, how do we reimagine that activity? How do we think through this exchange of touching someone's hands and actually saying the palms have to be close, and you have to lock hands and make eye contact and make sure they can hear you and project, and being close, appropriately close to the individuals, and then completely shifting that. So we thought about the picture in the middle, which was to actually host just Zoom calls where the students' faces would be there, appropriate, and the recruiters would be there and the information would be exchanged. But then what about the student who may not project as well on a camera? Or what about the idea of trying to share the space but not getting your individual time due to technology? And what about the employers who cannot download Zoom? So we tried to think about that portion. So we came up with a hybrid situation where we would have multiple activities to achieve the goal of that first picture that we really emphasize. So keeping in mind, my colleagues mentioned this, our student population is a drop by population. They see something and normally it triggers in their mind that they need to do something. And for us in the past, we would have signage all over campus the day before the fair so that they would be prepared and ready to drop in and not have to make an appointment, but to come to the fair. In order to make sure the students would show up, we had 10 days before the event, what we call our Zoom virtual session, where employers were asked to make sure that they downloaded the Zoom. We owned the actual activity. We managed everything, where the employers would just be there to give a 2-minute overview and then moved to a breakout room so that students could get a snapshot. It would be doing activity hour, short, constantly moving, but allowing the students to make the connection, and our alumni, because oftentimes we have to serve both the alumni and the students. In addition to that, because there's a resume exchange, we partnered with another vendor and allowed the students to be able to upload their resume and record themselves ahead of time in order to give their 30-second commercial. So to be able to say without a mask who they are, provide their resume, talk a little bit about themselves, which are the things we typically want to achieve at the career fair, and to make sure that the exchange of the resume could happen. We did that 10 days before our actual face-to-face event. And the next picture you see are appointment-based face-to-face career fairs. So in the photo, you see the employers. There's a plexiglass in between them. These students have masks on. The event took place in the TED, which allowed us to have external individuals on campus, but the external individuals had to do what our students do, which is fill out the COVID-19 form. We duplicated that same exact form in a Google Sheet and made it mandated that the employers had to fill that out 3 days prior to the event. They had to do it every single day and provide us with that information. If they did not provide us with that information, we had a checklist, and if their names was not on that list before they ever entered the arena, they were turned away by someone who had a face shield and was standing outside. Only the students who had the green COVID testing information could enter the arena, and they had to either have an appointment or had to be able to access an appointment. We QR code all the appointments so that if they wanted to just do it on the spot, they could use their phone, scan in, and get a slot with the employers. And we made sure everything was socially distanced. The spacing of the students in the waiting area was socially distanced. And we had what we call a space monitor who walked through to remind students that although they enjoy seeing each other and wanted to high five each other or shake hands, we reminded them that that wasn't permitted. There were hand sanitizers in between. Every vendor was given a visor if they wanted an additional layer of protection. The students were asked to stay on one side. Where we really enjoy name tags for both the students and the employers. The employers had the students' resumes and their full face on their phones through the vendor that we utilized, so they would know who they were talking to and could be reminded about the individual's name. The students in front of them in the picture they have a sheet of the company name and the person's name and whom they're talking to, so that they didn't have to get close to the plexiglass. They could read that from where they were. And after every person physically sat at that table, we wiped behind each individual to make sure the area stayed sanitized. So for us, we tried to make sure that what we achieved in the first picture with the career fair, where people could connect, where they could feel like they were celebrating their strengths and their abilities and their skills, we duplicated that in 3 layers to make sure the students still got the opportunity of achieving their goals. Our alumni were only able to participate in the vendor piece where you do your 30-second commercial, as well as with the Zoom sessions, but they were not allowed to participate in the the face-to-face activity only because we had the restrictions. And when you have so many employers you have to account for, and so many staff members and so many students, we had to make sure to, in order to stay within the guidelines of under 50, that we just had the alumni to participate in Zoom. And also, while we were doing the face-to-face, we also had Zoom activities happening. So students who didn't feel comfortable being face-to-face, or the vendors who didn't feel comfortable being face-to-face, or the vendors who we turned away because they did not fill out those forms in the allotted time frame, could join us via Zoom and still connect. So all of that activity took place, and we have a quick video. If we could click that YouTube link, I don't know. You may be able to hear the sound. If not, we can send it. But it looks like it's loading. We're gonna pause for a moment.
You can't hear the sound?
I can't hear the sound, or neither can I see it.
And you can't see it. Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay. But it's just a quick video that will let you see from the student point of view how to prepare for it, because there were a lot of different layers. And for the and so you could visually see the whole operation. If we are unable to do that, I'll put it in chat and you can see it at another time. Are there any questions?
We may have to put it in the chat because
We'll definitely do that. That is not a problem. So
Thank you.
no, thank you. So that'll be in the chat.
Okay, so both Chantal and Saranet have talked about quite a few of these components as well. But when we were considering our weeks of welcome, or week of welcome, and our programs all weekend, weeks of welcome was developed, right? Was that we had a much longer time frame that we needed to support and engage students. And so we found in that scenario was we were making multiple programs of the same program multiple times. And so that was one of the opportunities that we were looking at for weeks of welcome. And then the other piece with our programs all weekend and our weekend programming, our student organizations currently are pretty limited on what they can do in person still. And so we were trying to fill some of that space that was created because our student organizations have been such a vibrant part of our community in that in-person engagement component. So like I mentioned, we did like movies 3 nights in a row. We did novelties on multiple days. We worked with like a traditions walk. We did that twice during weeks of welcome. And then we used shifts. So we might do something like, for example, tonight with our silent disco, we are hosting 2 different sessions for students so that they can kind of come and join us for a certain time frame. We close everything down, clean things, and start again. One of the big things that we need to consider when we're looking at any in-person is event flow. So where are they coming in? What does the space look like? What is the containment of that space? What's the capacity? Is it any lower than our then 50 or now 25 people that we can have in that space? Where do they exit? Do they enter and exit at the same place? What does that entire experience from when they walk in to when they walk out look like? So those are some of the components that we had to consider and add to our opportunities. Another thing that I have now is I have event kits. So that includes hand sanitizers, gloves, wipes, signage, additional signage that we have here in LSI, whether that is something and that we're willing to share and rotate through. And so there's both things that are outdoors for yard signs. We have A-frames. We have things that can go up on the walls. So those are some of the things, and just those events that we would typically do inside somewhere, we had to find a different option. Even in the time that I've been in this meeting or this program with you, I've just gotten notification that a space that I was using for a program in about 2 weeks is no longer available. So now I need to shift and decide where else can I go. And I think that is the biggest takeaway that I've taken from this experience is I've always been a plan Z kind of person, but I've really had to be a plan Z kind of person and be ready and okay with shifting. Considering those grab and go components, what are those things that whether I'm a student who maybe wants to stay and connect, I can do that there potentially, or if I just want to participate, but I want to take it with me, like what kind of kits can we put together? And also what can shift? So when we're thinking about these events, like if I take Week of Welcome or Weeks of Welcome and our Make and Take novelties, we thought about, okay, if this day it rains, if we can't do this with as many students, let's make sure we're picking something that can be used later that isn't tied to that specific day as much as possible. We also considered how are our giveaways geared more towards COVID prevention. So we're doing 2 of those things. So for example, working with Student Activities Council, they made sure they ordered masks. So you have to have a face covering in order to participate. You don't have one? Great, we have one for you. You can still participate right here. And so how can we incorporate those kinds of things for them, or hand sanitizers, any of those kinds of things? Working with Aramark for food delivery, thinking about how can we offer something in a safe way along with all of our policies and procedures. We're doing a pumpkin patch in a couple weeks, and I were like, you know what, we really want hot chocolate. Okay, great, hot chocolate is delicious, but normally that's served in a way that is a shared multi-touch component. And so how can we do that? So we worked with them and we're like, okay, we want to do this. How do we do it? So they have a way to sanitize the dispenser and to work with that. And we have like packets that they're putting together that like a little gift bag, if you will, then you can put together your hot chocolate and it's you right there. Another thing that we're looking at is that hybrid speaker versus vendor. So we can't have a vendor on campus. Well, how can we bring them here? So that we have an upcoming program called Crayola Calligraphy, where typically we would have someone come in and be on hands-on with our students. Well, given our current environment, our facilitator will be virtual. Some of our students will be virtual, and we will have some students in person. And so if they feel that they're comfortable doing so, it's really offering all those options. And so that's a way where, yes, we understand that we have a hybrid speaker, that they can't be here physically, but they can still participate and interact. We're looking at doing a murder mystery dinner. Now the vendor has made it completely virtual, but they have a way that the students can participate on their phone. So if they want to come and join us in North Caf and get some food as a part of it, they can still connect in that space. There's separate tables for them to sit at, but they could join on their phones, but they're still sharing the space if they so choose. And then you've heard us reference multiple times our silent disco tonight, how we've looked at that space, right? A silent disco, for those of you who aren't aware, is everyone has headphones. And are listening to different courses of music. And so thinking about that, it's a socially distanced dance party. So we are putting tape on the ground 10 feet away from each other, and they have kind of this square that they're within. We had to consider, how do we clean the headphones? Do we even do it that way? Do we have it where they are bringing their own headphones? So considering all of those different options, and as we've mentioned more than once, last night our event got switched around a bit, and so we even are looking at, okay, now we're going to have a checkout location. So it's 25 at a time, but could we say, all right, if we have 5 people leave early, does that give us space to enable 5 more people to join us? Potentially, but knowing who is in that space at that time is so critical. So if we have them check out, then we know what time they left. If it was before our complete shutdown in between shifts or at the end of the evening. And one thing that I didn't add in here was movies. We've done outdoor movies. We've considered doing movies like drive-in movies, and we have done one movie so far in person. But again, we were considering how are they spaced out. We've done it in shifts. And we've provided all kinds of opportunities. Students can, when they come in, if they want to, even though we've already done it, we provide them with a way to wipe down their tables, just for their peace of mind. And throughout all of these, face coverings are required. Everyone has to show their daily COVID check-in. And there's tons of signage everywhere reminding them to maintain social distancing. And so far, our students are adhering to that when they are doing these in-person activities. All right, so we thought it would be fun to do a little case study, right? So with the number of people that we have, we'll probably just kind of stay together in a group rather than going into breakout rooms. So our case study today is that the university, through leadership and student involvement and health promotion with our student organizations, we traditionally host a fall festival as an alternative programming event. We usually have a large crowd. We usually have music and food and a lot of hands-on activities to engage a ton of students. And some of these activities are brought to campus through third-party vendors. So most of the students and many students view this as the best part of their fall semester. It's like the place to be. And this year, Halloween falls on a Saturday, and students are looking for ways to socialize. So given our current reality, how can the university deliver an engaging, memory-making experience using at least some in-person activity? So some of the things we want to consider are like, what are those protocols that we need to put in place? What activities could be incorporated? Logistically, how could we make it actually happen? And what would look different or new? So this is the time where you can unmute yourself. You can also use the chat feature. We really want to hear from you guys of what you think could make this case study work. So starting off with those protocols, what do we need to consider? Crowd control, RSVPs, and sign up. Yep. So one of the great things with that is thinking about, do we have a space that can be controlled? You know, is it a space that is too spread out? Is it a place that we need that already has barriers established, or do we need to create barriers? I have some beautiful Reign Responsibly event tape for anyone who may need it. It's one of the ways that we did our make and take novelties is we kind of created a space on Kaufman Mall. And with the happy hour with a twist, I know we created kind of a big barrier space using some stanchions that we have. And another really great thing about using Monarch groups is you can check in and sign up and check in even right there. So we use a lot of QR codes in order to do that. And we can also check them in if they have a phone that does not have that capability, we can do that. So only 25 people at a time. Yep. So definitely considering what shifts we are in, or, you know, what are the activities and how long it might take a participant to do that. So being able to mimic the activities done by a third party or vendors while following guidelines, and see if they can send swag. Yeah. And a lot of our vendors have had to make that change too, right? Like they have had to adjust to this current reality because it's not unique to ODU. And so we do find that a number of them are doing drop shipping of certain things. And there are vendors that we can't work with because they are not able to do that. And so we have to say, I'm really sorry, but that's not going to work for us right now. Hopefully in the future. Anything else you can think of for our protocols? Live stream of Hocus Pocus outside. You know, I'm not going to not say that that's not happening. And I might have purchased it even today. But also being able to where people could watch it at home and in residence halls. There's some unique things around movies in terms of being able to stream them. We can talk about that too if we want to get into the nitty gritty, but there are ways to do different things. Netflix watch parties are a great way to connect across the board. And it does have a interactive component too. Any other thoughts? Okay. I know we've kind of started to talk a little bit, you know, we talked a little bit about like, what are something themed, right? What are those giveaways that we can do that are themed, or those activities that can happen? You know, we were thinking about like oversized yard games. Are those safe? Question mark. Could it become safer if anyone who does and participates with it, that they're wearing gloves? Would that be an option? Would wiping down any of the materials in between, would that be a better fit? So thinking through all of those things. Okay. If you think of anything more, let us know, because this hypothetical event is happening in a couple weeks. So, or is planning to happen.
And I'm so excited, by the way.
Yeah, it's being called Fall in Love with ODU. Decorate your mask contest. Love it, love it. Yes, a lot of prizes. Yeah, cool. Awesome. All right. So this is also, we wanted to give you the chance that if you are considering a program or you've done a program for years and you really want to be able to deliver this successfully, how can we reimagine it? And we hope that this group could help peer-to-peer of what's an event or a program or something that you want to do, but are maybe just struggling on how to make it work. I don't know if anyone had an idea or one that they had brought with them.
I don't have anything like for in-person because we don't do a ton of like large scale in-person events, but I do have a question on like any ideas on how to make a virtual program more like exciting to students, or like how do you get their buy-in when it's something as simple as I'm trying to get students to know about the Dean of Students office, and I know a lot of students are stuck right now with absences and they have a lot of academic difficulties going on, and I want them to know that our office is available. But we're doing like an Ask Us Anything hour, but I just feel like unless students feel enticed to like log on to Zoom, that they just don't like want to. So I'm just like wondering like if anybody has had a successful virtual event, because we can't accommodate, you know, a lot of students in the Dean of Students office. So I'm just trying to think about, you know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, and Courtney might remember this as well, over the summer, the Women's Center hosted Teal Table Talk, and they had some pretty good participation doing it on Instagram Live. Sometimes it's switching your venue, your virtual venue essentially, and moving it somewhere where students already are. I know that we had about 40 to 50 students log in to Teal Table Talk over the summer, which I was really surprised to get those type of numbers. And they were engaged and, you know, really involved in the conversation. So sometimes it's as simple as switching up that venue. I know for us in health promotion, we've been doing a lot of our virtual component pieces literally on Instagram, because that's just where it's easier to get to the students versus having them. It kind of gives you that walk by, kind of that same type of thing where I'm in Web Center and someone's tabling, I'm gonna pop by. It kind of gives you that same feel, but just virtually. When it's Zoom, they have to intentionally click that Zoom link to get there, and sometimes I think that is a barrier, especially for our first year students, um, who may not be thinking about, what's happening with the Dean of Students office. And then we've also incorporated some giveaways in some of our online components. An example would be not happy hour. Oktoberfest kickoff was virtual, and we did some giveaways, and I think that probably helped get us some numbers for that event. One of the barriers with that, though, is you can't even really track who is there. Like with Zoom, you can track, okay, what students participated. When you're on Instagram or some other type of social media platform, you kind of have an idea of how many, but not necessarily who.
You could use that though, like if you are using a prize feature, right? Like that they would have to enter a form, right, to get the prize, to capture participation. So that's a thought as well. I have a handout that I'm happy to send to everyone of some ideas. I know one of the things also is like, does it need to be a like a Zoom or like a synchronous moment, or can it be done asynchronously with a short video or something like that? Getting a student leader to also be kind of the face of that is an option. One of the things that working with SAC, what they've done is they've tried to make some of their virtual programs more of a production. So it's not just a Zoom, it's, that they have an MC and there's like music in between, or there's just a little bit more of a higher level of activity going on, and that makes it more enticing to them. And then definitely the Kahoot component or games, prizes, those kinds of things are all options. I am working also, just so everyone knows, I am working on a programming survey as well. So hopefully maybe we'll get some answers too. Any other thoughts or questions or programs that you're trying to convert? Okay. Well, that is the conclusion of everything we had for today. Hopefully you were able to walk away with some considerations or different things that you might have thought differently, or some nuggets. But I am happy to stay behind and troubleshoot with anybody. And at any point, I always am open for brainstorming through how to get to a yes, particularly in these times, or how we can do it in the safest and most reasonable way that we possibly can.